Capital University of Punjab, Bathinda. Today I feel privileged to introduce to you all the distinguished speaker from South Korea, Professor Kyun Lee. He's from School of Economics, Seoul National University, South Korea. He has been former vice chair at National Economic Advisory Council for the President of Korea and editor of Research Policy Journal and Industrial and Corporate Change. Along with Professor Kyon Lee, we have with us Professor Ramesh Salian from Center of Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Sir, I welcome you both on the behalf of Indian Research Scholar Association.
Thank you.
Dear participants, we will be listening to Professor Kyon Lee on the topic of innovation development detours for latecomers, managing global local interfaces in the deglobalization era. So, to begin with, I invite Dr. Vikas Kumar, chair of our association, for welcome address. Dr. Vikas, over to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arpanji. So first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt welcome to Professor Ramesh
sir, who is also my guru,
teacher and mentor, because sir has accepted this challenge in very short notice.
So you're
most welcome, Professor Ramesh Salian, sir.
And
I would like to welcome today's speaker, Professor Kyun Lee, sir.
When I have talked to Professor Ben Eke Lundwal and Professor Kyun Lee, Ben Eke Lundwal has delivered 2-3 lectures in our association. So the person,
Dr. Vikas, your voice is breaking, I guess.
In our association.
Okay,
so
now my voice is coming?
Now.
Okay. So
still breaking.
So
1 minute. Abhi, now
I cannot hear you.
Audible, Arpanji?
Shall we proceed?
Yes, Arpanji, please invite Professor Lee to present his
Sir,
better.
Yes, our convener of today's session.
Okay, sure, no problem. I think now, Arpanji?
Sir, your voice is breaking a lot. We can't hear even a word.
Okay, I think there's just some network issue, Arpanji. So
yes.
So okay, I will express my regarding the Professor Kyun Lee. So, sir, you're welcome on behalf of the Indian Research Scholars Association and on behalf of me. So I think this lecture, our participants, research scholars and academicians will enjoy. So I will not take more time on all. I would like to welcome all the participants, organizing committee members. So over to you, Arpanji. I think there is just some network issue, so I will not take more time. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Shubhangi, if you are there, kindly introduce our speaker so that we can invite him to start the lecture.
Yeah.
Shubhangi.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Namaste and good evening, everyone. My name is Shubhangi Ambe, and I am a research scholar in the Faculty of Commerce and Management, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University. It is my privilege to introduce Professor Kyun Lee. Sir is a distinguished professor of economics at Seoul National University, South Korea, and founding director of the Center for Economic Catch-up. Professor Lee has a PhD from University of California, also a former vice chair, National Economic Advisory Council for the President of Korea, and also an editor of Research Policy Journal and Industrial and Corporate Change. Professor Lee is a fellow of the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research. He serves on the Committee for Development Policy at the United Nations, holds a seat on the World Economic Forum Council, Among the many honors awarded to Professor Lee are the 2014 Schumpeter Prize for his book Schumpeterian Analysis of Economic Catch-up, and the 2019 CAP Prize from the European Association for Evolutionary Political Economy. He was also president of the International Schumpeter Society from 2016 to 2018. Professor Lee's research focuses on economic catch-up, innovation systems, industrial policy, and technological change, especially in emerging economics such as Korea and China. He is also well known for his influential publications, including The Art of Economic Catch-up, Barriers, Debtors, and Leapfrogging. With his outstanding academic contributions, global advisory roles, and leadership in development economics, the presence of Professor Lee greatly enriches our event. I warmly welcome Professor Kyun Lee to the virtual stage. Please, sir, enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I start?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you. Yeah, I feel great honor to have this opportunity to present my research outcome and to discuss with you. Okay. Thank you for mentioning Schumpeter Prize, because this year's Nobel Prize Economics, two of them also awarded the Schumpeter Prize before, several years before me. Okay. The Mokier and Egian, they also got Schumpeter Prize. Okay. So my talk today is more recent research outcome by me. So in the first part, I'll talk about my new book in this title, Innovation Development Detours. Okay. The second part, briefly, I'll try to discuss national innovation system of India in comparison with Korea and other BRICS economies. Okay. That part is already published in Indian Journal, Political and Economic Weekly. Yeah, that's the one already published. Okay. So this is my new book, just published last year. It is open access, so you are welcome to download for free. Okay. But before this book, 2019, I have this book about the art of economic catch-up. They argue that latecomers can still catch up with foreigners by taking detours and leapfrogging. Even when ladder to rich economy kicked away, you know, Ha-Jun Chang, another Korean economist, said that the ladder to become a rich economy is kicked away by incumbent advanced countries. But I said, we don't need a ladder because we're going to take a balloon. Balloon means leapfrogging. Because we don't follow the same path as incumbent, we don't need a ladder. We don't follow you. So this is to introduce the idea of leapfrogging and detours. Okay. Then why another book last year? Because a new book, I'm arguing for multiple pathways of economic growth, not just manufacturing, but you can use IT services like India, some resource-based sectors, which I introduced today. Then also now we are facing new era, deglobalization era. So this also pushes us to seek new mode of growth. Okay. Also, I'll talk about the kinds of detours in the role of government and industrial policies. They have become a new topics and issues in nowadays, a new era of deglobalization. So this graph shows the detours. We are starting from here and we'll reach this destination. There is a highway, it's best way, but not necessarily if there is a traffic jam. So if you jam in the highway, you cannot reach your goal, destination earlier than other guys who are taking detours. So longer distance, but nobody there, you can drive fast if you have good driving skill, which means innovation, capability, or other skill. So the idle detour makes sense because if you follow typical economic growth ideas, the road is kind of crowded, so you cannot achieve a goal. But there's too much competition among latecomers who are doing the same thing. Okay, it's kind of adding a problem. Okay? So this is the basis for proposing the idea of detours and leapfrogging. Okay? So this shows the series of events pushing us to the globalization era, starting from 2008 global financial crisis, which was brought to financial globalization. In 2016, there was Brexit, it's a major retreat from globalization. Then 2018, we saw beginning of US-China trade war, which was setback against trade globalization. And pandemic is another blow to production globalization, or leading to fragment, too much GBC fragmented over too much location over the world is a big source of risk. Okay. Then Russia-Ukraine war is another step toward the deglobalization of the world, especially agricultural goods. First time US imposed sanction against Russia in terms of using the SWIFT system, the financial kind of weapon. Okay. So in this era of deglobalization, I think there are three key themes. One is new role of states are coming back with the industrial policies, changing GBCs. So we have to seek new mode of growth. So this is kind of background for my new book. Okay? So in the book, I'm asking several key questions, new answers. First question is whether latecomers should we follow or not the path of incumbent advanced countries. Answer is that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. Your slides are not moving.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Then we have to go back to the...
Yeah, good. Now it's moving.
Now we can see it.
Key questions and answers for latecomers in this book.
Okay. So
Yeah,
this
why-
was the idea of detours. I talk about deglobalization. And this key question. Okay, so let me use this one. So first question is whether we should follow or not the path of incumbent advanced economies. Our answer is that, okay, we have to start from following the path to learn. But later, we can take detours or create our own path. That means leapfrogging. Second question, whether we should be open or not. Okay. The answer is that we should be, of course, open. But we got to manage this global local interface with a strategic vision. So we have to create more locally owned big businesses and SMEs. Another issue between SME and big business, which one we should put priority? And I'll explain later. It's okay to promote big business first, the SME follow later. That's another detours that happened in Korea and China. Regarding sectoral choices, I would argue that not only manufacturing, but also IT services and other resource-based sectors are useful for latecomers economic development. So overall, I would say not single linear mode, but non-linear or multiple pathways are possible for latecomers. And finally, in terms of role of government, we also argue for detours. So I explain these ideas in what follows. Okay. So these are the contents of the book. In the chapter 2, I'll discuss national human system. Then chapter 3 discuss several cases of how to manage global local interface to create more local domestic value added. Then chapter 5 is Korean model of development in terms of detour concept. Then role of government along the detours. So I'll explain some of these today. Okay. So you can interrupt me anytime for quick questions and clarification, or we can try to have a separate time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So first theme is that the global, local, global detours. Okay. So in chapter 3, I discuss several cases. I'll discuss briefly one by one. Okay. First case is this 3 cities experiences. Taipei, which is capital town of the Taiwan. Shenzhen, the north of Hong Kong, is the new high-tech city of China. Then Penang is the Malaysia's region, which has been open for very early times for multinational from USA and abroad. Okay. So these 3 cities has sharing common initial conditions. They all try to grow by inviting FDI in IT manufacturing. Okay. Taipei has early start from 1960s. Then Shenzhen started 1980. Penang started 1970. So basically, Shenzhen started 10 years later than Penang. Okay. But nowadays, Shenzhen is far advanced than Penang. And what's the reason? So this shows the per capita GDP of Taipei, Shenzhen, Penang. So Penang used to be higher than Shenzhen, but nowadays some gap emerges. And we can try to explain why this is happening. One simple answer is that innovation, measured by number of US patents. This is Taipei, Shenzhen, Penang. Even if you divide by number of population, same orders. So Penang has been successful in attracting FDI, but no success in promoting its own domestic-owned companies and innovation. That's the reason Penang getting lagged in terms of economic progress, and this shows the key variable. So I look at number of US patent, and I also look at who are the legal owners, assignee of the patent. So this is Taipei. From 40%, almost 100% is all Taipei people owned. Shenzhen too. Shenzhen early days, very little owned by local Chinese people, but now it increased to 90%. Penang, no increase. So Penang, even if they do some R&D, all outcome patents owned by US or Western multinationals. So Penang just remain as a FDI location without generating indigenous companies. Although they have the same initial conditions as Shenzhen, but outcome is eventually different. That's the source of income gap between these 2 regions. Okay, that means you got to be open, but that's not everything. You have to create your own local company. That's first messages. Okay, so if we summarize, there was aggressive industrial policy in Shenzhen to promote local company, promoting spin-off from MNCs. Okay, there was a very asymmetric government intervention, promote local company. For example, they managed public-private venture capital to provide funding for local companies. Whereas in Penang, they just only talk about human capital, providing skilled labor for multinationals, so that they can stay in Penang, even if there is local wage rate is rising. So Penang is okay. Penang is also more or less success, but not as great as Shenzhen. Basically, different policy direction has led to these different outcomes. Okay. Then I can tell similar story of automobile sectors in China, Malaysia, Thailand. Okay, so Malaysia promoted locally owned company called Proton, local brand, with active industrial policies, but eventually failed. It was sold to foreign company, Geely from China. Thailand, one of the biggest sector in automobile in Asia. But is it really succeeding? Not much, because it is still Japanese ownership. So they only producing limited amount of domestic value added or high-tech, high value added segment, like engine, transmission, all still under control by Japanese. Okay. So in the papers, in the chapter, I try to explain more detail what happened these auto sectors in several countries. Okay. Basically, Thailand failed in Malaysia failed in auto despite local ownership and despite supportive policies, because there are no competition, no discipline from world market. These their own companies are kind of oligopoly, monopoly in domestic market, but not globalized in foreign market. So there is no discipline. So they eventually failed. Thailand, I call it mixed success. They are doing better than Malaysia, but no local ownership, protected and only protection. So they are weak domestic value added. And they didn't go much globalization. China, more successful cases, more similar to Korean cases, while they're protecting local manufacturers through restricting foreign ownership to be less than 50, but there are fierce competition in domestic market, and they increase domestic value added. Okay. So this shows one indication of GVC participation measured by foreign value added share of gross export. This is kind of backward linkage of GVC participation. It shows that when you export, how much is foreign value added, how much is domestic value added. This is Korean cases. Okay. So Korea joined GVC, but from 80s, it decreasing because Korea domesticated, formerly imported engine transmission, which we import from Japan. So domestic value increased, but now Korea is globalized, so they are sending their factory abroad. Okay? So sending abroad low-end segment, but keeping high-end segment domestically. So this increase. Same thing happened in China. From 1995, keep decreasing. Everything made in China. So China increased domestic portion of the export. So GVC indicator decreased. Whereas Thailand, Malaysia remain very high. That means not much domestic value added. Still foreign value added is major part of their export. This is middle income trap. Issue generate period is decreasing, increasing domestic value added. If you don't do that, that's example of a source for middle income trap. Now, third case is resource-based development. This shows per capita income of several countries as a percentage of US in PPP terms. So Korea reached 70% US, same as Japan. Now we are slightly higher than Japan. Malaysia is reached 50%. Chile slightly over 40%. Different from Mexico, Thailand, who remain below 40% for several decades. Middle income trap. So I do see Malaysia might be next countries who are growing the middle income trap after Korea's. How it can possible? Not because of manufacturing, but because of several resource sectors. Okay, so how come Malaysia doing well despite the failure in automobile? Okay, well, new sectors are not IT manufacturing, but palm oil, rubber, petroleum product. In Chile too, the success story is coming from fruit, wine, salmon, wood product. And these sectors are doing well, not because of free market, but there is active industrial policies to build capability in vertical value chain, also emergence of local-owned companies, common success factors. In the case of palm oil, Malaysia, very important cases. Okay, Malaysia, this is now second largest source of trade surplus for Malaysia. Okay, but in early days, Malaysia used to export only crude palm oil or unprocessed global added. But now they switched to processed high value added palm oil. Okay, how this happened? There are interesting stories. Okay. And also the palm oil plus this petroleum rubber product, they are showing Malaysia trade surplus as big as E&E. E&E means IT product, electronic and electronics product. So their contribution is same as the IT manufacturing. Okay. So what happened to this palm oil sector in Malaysia? So Malaysia tried to promote exporting of only processed palm oil. So they charged, and when they tried to do that, Europe said, you cannot dare to export processed palm oil. Why don't you keep exporting crude palm oil? So Europe tried tariff against Malaysian export to processed palm oil. So in return, Malaysia charged export duties for crude palm export. And still problem, so eventually Malaysia did a hostile takeover of British-owned plantation farm in Malaysia in London stock exchanges. Because they are the also exporting crude palm oil. So they nationalized it. Not nationalized it, they just bought their share in London stock market and made it Malaysian owned. So that ended all the struggle between Malaysia and UK. Then on top of that, Malaysia provide R&D support, incentive for value addition. They set up several research labs to make it more high value added and environmentally friendly. This is most interesting case of transition from crude palm oil to processed palm oil export. Okay. So in this era of deglobalization, this resource-based industrialization is very important. This is in manufacturing. So there are two manufacturing. One is the assembly type, which is IT. This is processing manufacturing, processing your own resources into manufactured goods. Okay. The implication from these three cases that IT cluster in Taipei, Shenzhen, Penang indicate that local ownership are important. The auto sector in Asia indicate that local ownership should be combined with the global market discipline. In other words, export orientation are important. Then resource-based sectors in Chile, Malaysia indicate that market force alone cannot do the magic, but industrial policy has a role. And also not necessarily manufacturing, but resource sector can be an engine for growth and catching up. Overall, global local interface very important. Okay. On hand, it is managed with a strategic vision. It can lead to creation of domestic value-added domestic jobs based on local ownership and knowledge. Okay. That's one part. Now let's turn to the issue of big business versus startups. So this is Schumpeter, which got Nobel Prize. He is Schumpeterian Nobel Prize. But you know, there are two Schumpeters. One is Schumpeter Wang Young. In this book, he emphasized SME and startups or creative destruction. And Macho Schumpeter, in his later book, talk about importance of big businesses. Only do scale, you can do bigger scale R&D and thereby innovation. So these two Schumpeter are very interesting. Okay, and this is somewhat contradictory each other. So this is from Lacan point of view, which one we should emphasize. And my answer in the book is that we can take detours. First, we have to select some of startup, make them quickly grow into big. Then SME will follow later. So kind of a detour from big to big business then SME startup later. Actually, history of capitalism in Germany, UK, England, all there was a rise of big businesses, early 20th century. That's the Chandler's main argument. And latecomers like Korea, China also same. Korea, China doing well because they generated world-class big businesses. Korea is Samsung, Hyundai Motors. China is BYD or Huawei or others. Okay, so without local big business, all your startups are eventually acquired by foreign big businesses like Google, and some of them close after M&A. This is another form of brain drain, knowledge drain. So the issue is not to make many startups, but how to make some of them to grow into big businesses. Okay. So this shows number of big business measured by Fortune 500 companies. Okay. US used to have more than 200 out of 500, but after IT bubble burst, it decreased, now less than 130. Look at China. China used to have only 2, but now more than US. Look at Japanese decline. Japan used to have 150 in its best days, 1955, 95, but now less than 50. So Japanese decline is corresponding to Japanese loss in number of big businesses. And look at China's rise. You know, China used to have a same number of big business in 1995. India used to have 3. But India still now have only less than 10, where China generated 135 big businesses. That's where India is lacking. Okay, I'll tell you this story more. Okay. So in my other papers, I did some econometrics to prove that to go with middle-income trap, you got to generate world-class businesses. Otherwise, you are middle-income trap. Okay? So in the graph, in the paper, I have this graph. So this country location, vertically, this distance from 0 is that the degree you generate big business more than your country size. Horizontally, this is share of big business in your GDP. So it's kind of measure of economic concentration. It is bad, minus effect. Okay, so best is go vertically, but Korea, China, Japan, all above this line. That means they have more big business than the country size. Same with Taiwan. Taiwan joined high income because Taiwan generated the TSMC, Formosa, the world-class companies. BRICS is luckily going from this area to moving from these areas. China, India, Brazil also. This is good progress. But if you remain below this line, then middle-income country. Thailand, Turkey, Mexico, and so on. Okay. So this is the number of unicorns. US, China, then India is doing very well. Okay. And Korea is also doing okay, same as France. So Korea is known for big business country, but we are also generating unicorns successfully. Then India, we are doing very well in generating unicorns, but very poorly in generating big businesses. That's India's weakness. This shows number of Fortune 500 company, United, Japan, and so on. India now have less than 10. Same as Taiwan. India much bigger than Taiwan, but we have same non big businesses, although we have many unicorns. Okay? And many unicorns are acquired by foreign companies and become US company, not growing into Indian company. Okay? That's one of the weaknesses of India's innovation system. This is number of SME on the Korean big businesses. Samsung, on the Samsung, there are so many couple of 1,000 SME growing on the Samsung umbrella as a supplier. So we do big business, domestic big business, they're carrying many SME under them as a suppliers. Okay? Hyundai Motors too. About 8,000 SME are under some Hyundai Motors. So SME grow firstly as a exclusive supplier, then supply to several companies, then go global. This is a typical path of SME growth. And this number of, this is 3 big tech company in US, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and China's counterpart. Chinese Baidu is their counterpart Google, Alibaba is the counterpart Amazon, Tencent is counterpart Facebook. Then Korea is also, Naver is Korean version of Google, Kakao is a Korean counterpart to Facebook, Coupang is Korean counterpart to Amazon. So this shows that it shows how many years it took to go into stock market. Google took 6 years to go to Nasdaq. Chinese Baidu took 5.6 years in Nasdaq. Okay, Korean Naver took less than 4 years. That means China has its own ecosystem to scale up startup very quickly into big businesses on the stock market. Okay? So although we are known for big business-oriented country, we are generating the startups quickly. Naver, Kakao, the founder is former employee of Samsung. They quit Samsung, founded this startup, and become a global big tech company. So I see my point is that there is a synergy or co-evolution between big business and startups, not necessarily the negative relation between each other. Only the big business, you can generate more startups. Tencent, carrying 100 startups under Tencent. Tencent invest into many startups. The policy implication is that the policy of big business first, SME later makes sense in the context of emerging economy because we are full of market failures or institutional void. Then theme 4 is that detour in the role of government. Okay, so in that economy, we said that rural government should be getting less and less with the rise of income level. But I don't think that's the correct. It might be non-linearity. In the middle, during upper middle income stages, you got to have more role for government. Why? We are facing more entry barriers in upper middle income stages. Low income is okay, just to attract based on your resource endowment. So you don't need to have any rural government. But if you reach middle income, you try and enter high-end segment, you face more entry barriers from incumbent countries and IPR litigation and so on. You got to have a vertical industrial policies to move your firm into high-end segment. That require open public intervention because in Korean case, we did many public-private joint R&D to break into mobile phone, digital TV, semiconductors. All involved public research labs, their funding, knowledge sharing, risk sharing. It didn't happen alone by Samsung. Okay? Example, Samsung's memory chip businesses. Samsung started as a wafer fabrication as an OEM with imported facilities. Okay. And Samsung have to develop their own design technology by setting up R&D center in Silicon Valley. So Samsung faced patent litigation by Texas Instruments. Okay? So that means these are typical entry barrier issues. Okay? So eventually when Samsung tried to develop much larger capacity of 4 megabit semiconductor chips, there was a formation of a semiconductor R&D consortium with a private company and public research labs. It was a major breakthrough which generate current Samsungs in global semiconductor chip market. Because this size require bigger investment of money and risk taking. So it was done jointly with public-private companies. So I just say there are two modes of government involvement. One is slow yet steady mode, like Penang in Malaysia. So government only focus on reskilling, upskilling for local labor force, so they can hired by MNCs. So it's okay. Penang is more successful in a sense. But that's not enough. If you want to be more ambitious, aggressive, that's the mode of Shenzhen or Utesita in China. With asymmetric intervention, they try to foster domestic companies and support their R&D. So they can keep growing over the foreign-owned companies. So my book conclusion is that I'm providing alternative ideas to prevailing idea on economic development. Rather than just one linear mode, I suggest there are multiple pathways to economic catch-up by latecomers. Latecomers do not necessarily follow the trajectory of incumbent because of a need to overcome entry barriers, IPL barriers, and protectionism. Now, US become one of the most protected countries in the world. Okay? So most of a successful catching up involved strategically managing, maneuvering global local interface. You got to be open, but you got to manage the interface with strategic ideas to promote locally owned big businesses. 1,000 SME are not enough to put you on the high income status. Creation of growth pole possible not by free market, but by active policy intervention. So instead of traditional priority on manufacturing, I put priority on local ownership and knowledges. So in the book, I talk about multiple pathways, open, global, then generate local value added, and open again. SME, let them grow big, quickly into some big business, then with the big business, many SME follow. Okay. Education, or we can finish part 2, then we'll have a Q&A time. Okay. So now I'll talk about national human system, which is key concept in Schumpeterian economics. I'll make comparison of Korea, India, and other BRICS countries. So this part is published in Indian Journal, Economic and Political Weekly, just last year, in this title. This paper analyzed India's national human system from a comparative perspective. Especially on India's industrial transformation. So what is the human system? It is a mechanism that generates and produce knowledges and diffuse and use them. So basically, knowledge creation, diffusion mechanism. That's the subject of this year's Nobel Prize Economics. It's all about knowledges. Okay. So Schumpeterian said that if you have better NIs, you have a better innovation performance, also economic growth. If it is not functioning well, we call it there is a system failure, different from neoclassical market failures. Okay. So innovation system can be measured at national level, NIs, sector level, SSI, regional level, even firm level. Okay. So why there is a middle-income trap? Because middle-income economies get caught between low-wage manufacturers and high-wage innovators. So if the wage rate keep increasing, you got to move away from low-paid jobs, product, to high-paid jobs and product that require innovation. Innovation is key to overcoming middle-income trap. Okay. So this is my 2013 book to talk about innovation system at 3 levels: country level, sector level, firm level, and this is one I got a Schumpeter Prize 2014. Okay. So in the book, in my analysis, I have developed several measurements of NIS, okay, such as how much we are creating knowledge locally, rather than rely on some foreign sources. How much you are technically diverse. No, this is how much you are dispersed or concentrated. If you rely on just several big bennies, or you are relying on quite diverse entities in creating knowledges. Okay? But we are specializing in short or long cycle technologies. Short cycle means IT, I explained it. How much your knowledge is original? How much you are technically diversified? How much your knowledge is locally owned or foreign owned? So these are the important aspects of a system. You can measure this at national level, sector level, city level, or firm level, and you can do diverse empirical analysis. One key variable is cycle time. What is cycle time? It measures how much knowledge are quickly changing over time. So I found that Korea, Taiwan, East Asian countries, including China, they specialize in short cycle technology sectors, such as IT. So in IT, if you file patent, in 2 or 3 years, your patent become already outdated. So that means less entry barrier from latecomer point of view, because incumbent knowledge are not that important. They're quickly outdated. So less entry barriers. But short cycle means that high frequency innovation. So a high growth prospect. So this 10 or 9 means that is measurement of cycle time. So 9 means your patent cite average 9-year-old patent. In short cycle technology, they're citing only recent patent because old technologies are not important. For long cycle, you still cite old technology. That means more homework to do by latecomers. You cannot achieve something quickly in long cycle sectors like bio or machine tool and so on. In IT, you can do something quickly by relying on only recent knowledges. So actually, this is where creative disruption, the key concept in this Nobel Prize, is more quickly, frequently happening. That's the short cycle sectors. Okay? So more creative disruption means that more room for latecomers, because many incumbents are destroyed by creative disruption. Okay? So this shows top 10 patent classes where largest number of patents filed by European G5, Korea, Taiwan. Europe has more patents in drugs, material, measurement, or long cycle sectors. Whereas Korea, Taiwan has more patents in semiconductors, television, connectors, all short cycle. No overlaps at all. So Korea, Taiwan didn't follow same sector as Europe incumbent. We went opposite direction, which is our niche. More promising with less entry barrier. I have the same data table for Brazil, Argentina. There are many overlaps with the European G5 or long cycle. That's their failures. Okay. Long cycle, it takes long time. You write some papers, patent, but not much commercial success. Okay. So this is ideas. Okay. So short cycle means more frequent creative disruption. And that means low entry barriers and high growth potentials. So it's best criteria to specialization for latecomers. Basically, this is my idea in the 2013 book, which awarded me the Schumpeter Prize. I got prize by these ideas. But we are now turning into long cycle sectors. That's I call detours, from short to long cycle. From mid-80s, we targeted telephone switches, memory chips, cell phone, digital TV, but from 2001, we are moving into medicine, bio, and so on, long cycle. Because long cycle is good, high entry barriers, so high profit rate. Eventually, you should move to that. But if you go to that too early, it's disastrous. You cannot make commercial success. Now look at Samsung. Where is Samsung now investing? It's bio biosimilars. So in Incheon Airport, Samsung built huge biosimilar factories. Already become number 2 or 3 in terms of capacity. So Samsung moving from short cycle to long cycle. Why? In short cycle, easy to catch up, easy to be caught up by another latecomers like China. So Samsung want to move to long cycle sectors where there you see your profit more stable or difficult to catch up. Okay. So this is the top 10 company in Korean stock market. In 2010, we had many IT electronics, POSCO Steel, Hyundai Motors. For 2020, now we have 3 bio companies, Samsung Biologics, Celltrion, LG Health, and 2 big tech, Naver, Kakao. The Korean industry is changing from just short cycle or medium cycle heavy industry to long cycle and big tech companies. Basically, this is evidence of detours. Okay. So in my other article, I use these 5 key barriers of NIS: knowledge localization, technical diversification, originality, cycle time. Average means if more than 1 means long cycle, less than 1 means short cycle. Decentralization, how knowledge are created by more number of innovators or small number of big innovators. Okay? So Japan, US top, Taiwan, South Korea, China. India is next. Here India is 29th in terms of rank. Okay? So look at South Korea, China, very short cycle. Okay? And highly diversified. 0.7, 0.6, okay? Product Italy, very long cycle, 0.16, Korea 0.8. So I have proved that I developed composite index NIS. I take weighted average of these 5 variables, generate NIS index. I proved that in this article, NIS index is more robust variable to economic growth, more robust than economic complex index, which was famous by Hausman and Hidalgo. I found it is more robust than economic complex index. So let's turn to NIS of diverse countries based on this article, also based on recent article in Political Economy Weekly. Okay. So this India's US patent proportion into 6 classes. India used to have many patents in chemical drugs in relative sense, but India now generating many short cycle IT patents by India's led by Infosys, Wipro, and TCS. So India's IT service giant leading India's moving into short cycle IT services, which is very good. India very unique. You are strong both in long cycle drugs, chemicals, or short cycle IT services, although it's an IT manufacturing. So India has very balanced NIS in terms of technological specialization, which is very good, very unique India. This is India's strength. Okay. So in this article, I classified NIS into several types. Very balanced NIS in other countries, very imbalanced in emerging countries. But there are 2 types of emerging countries. One is short cycle catching up imbalance. The other is long cycle imbalance, middle income trapped NIS. So Korea, China is short cycle imbalanced. Brazil, South Africa is long cycle imbalanced, but middle income trapped. And India, Russia is medium cycle, balanced catch-up, balanced NIS. Okay. So this is cycle time average of group, short cycle sector, short cycle countries, India, China, South Korea. This is balanced catch-up with India, Russia. Mature is advanced country. Imbalance trap is Brazil and Argentina and so on. The cycle time too long. Okay. But now short cycle group is moving from short cycle to long cycle gradually. Okay. So this is cycle time of BRICS countries. Russia getting short and short. India is also very getting short and short because rise of IT service is very good, promising sign. Okay. India is short as South Korea nowadays. Too long is the South Africa or Brazil. It's not good. Okay. So I look at other indicator of NIS. First, your GNI as a percent to US. This is South Korea, Russia. India is at the lowest. Okay, we are only 10-15% to US level. And R&D expenditure GDP ratio is South Korea and China. Russia is above 1%. India is barely above 0.67. You got to increase this more. You got to spend more on R&D. Okay? Cycle time average, India is doing well because you are getting strong in IT services, same as China. Okay? Localization, China, Korea, Russia, okay, China, India is about 4%. We have to increase a little more. Okay? 4% means that when you cite patent, only 4% go to Indian-owned patent. You are citing 96% or foreign-owned patent. Korea used to be like that. We increased to 18%, which is similar to Japan. Okay. Technology diversification, how widely you are filing patent innovation. China, South Korea, India is doing well in this regard, rather than Russia or and so on. Okay. Originality, India in the middle. Okay. So if I summarize, China is one of the best catching up countries, rapidly increasing R&D ratio more than 2.5. NIS in China, similar to South Korea, short cycle technology, wide diversification, high national ownership. Okay. India, its rate R&D GDP is only 0.5%, and gradual increase of US patent. Every cycle time getting short and short, also more diversified, but very relatively low degree of localization, and local ownership is not that high. And moderate R&D is conducted by foreign entity in India. So India kind of low-cost R&D center for foreign MNCs. India needs to generate more locally owned big businesses rather than serving foreign MNCs. I'll skip the case of Russia or others. So let me stop here almost 1 hour. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Very, very good, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir, Panji, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Kyondi. We can, because we are already running short on time, maybe we can do two things simultaneously. We can ask our chair of the session to
Yes,
for the
sure.
comments, and meanwhile our participants, if they are having any questions, they can write it in chat box.
Chat
That
box.
will help.
Sure, sure. Because Arpanji, our session chair is also belong in the same field. So, Professor Salian is also from economics background. So I think he will take some time and will speak something. So you
No,
put
yeah, yeah.
point to him. Yes.
Yeah, because that is better to invite some, if any discussions, because there are many young scholars are there in the group. If any questions, because there is a professor, he has done lots of work in this field, and his work, his publications, highly appreciable. And if any scholars, if you want to ask a question or one or two questions, I think it's better. And it is a beautiful study, beautiful presentation, particularly for the young scholars, the global touch he has given to his subject is really awesome. And I request a few scholars to raise some questions.
Any participants have any questions? So you can ask to our speaker.
Or you can write in chat box. We will read it for you.
Yes.
Where is checkbox?
So actually, this has been our constant pattern that every time when a lecture ends, participants do take some time to process the lecture and ask questions. That's why I said we can do both the things simultaneously, like presidential address, and meanwhile our participants can think if they have some questions, or they can type it. If it works for you, sir.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you, Professor Lee. It's really actually my field of research is health economics and ICT in agriculture. I work on that more. But same time, I was teaching Indian economy for a long time. Even I was teaching international economics also. But it's the picture you have given about particularly these latecomer countries. The first credit I give to South Korea. 1954 onwards, particularly the way you reaped the benefit of particularly electronics and information technology that adopted by South Korea. Okay, because in the field of electronics, semiconductor and information technology, so one thing, and government policies, which supported very much for your success. And today we call you as the miracle of Asia because of this success rate. I always quote South Korea while teaching. I will give the examples. Okay, so India got independence in the year 1947. South Korea was maybe in 1954, and today
45.
1945.
Yeah.
Okay.
48. 45 liberation from colonial rule.
Okay.
After 3 years we got have a government. 48.
That bifurcation took place.
Huh?
A bifurcation took place between two nations. Maybe.
Yeah, that's from 48. 48.
Okay. So this thing, what we see in that respect. So even research and development, credit goes to South Korea. The initial very success rate goes to South Korea. Then second one about special economic zones of China with the local collaboration. Then in India, this in IT, information technology and service sector growth from 1991 onwards, you mentioned Infosys, TCS, and Wipro, that we capitalized the Western demand for this, so demand for outsourcing. So Indian, we capitalized it, and our youths, particularly fluent in English. So we benefited out of this. Instead of starting heavy industries, we concentrated more on the service sector growth. Even today, so for example, this instant delivery, that is sector in India, more than 5 to 7 firms, for Zepto or Instamart, Blinkit, Big Basket, the way they are generating, changing that by using local resources is really awesome. And apart from that, Taiwan small scale and medium industry is the one thing. The second observation in a particular automobile industry, Maruti Suzuki, maybe 1981 onwards, Maruti Suzuki. So Maruti Suzuki's share is maybe 56%. The remaining is Indian share. And apart from that, we have Hyundai and Kia in India, very famous. And same time, the Indian automobile sector also. For example, Mahindra, Tata. They're local. They're competing. There's a good thing. Even we are good in exporting also in a very European nations. That development I have seen, it's a really is a wonderful, and many that I was very much impressed by your presentation. I will take the PPT also, and many stock market listing, that data here given. Wonderful. I really appreciate. But only one concern about this geopolitical risk. And I think too much protectionism is happening nowadays. Trade restrictions, protectionism. I don't know what way it will affect, in coming for it, especially for these latecomer countries, because already these developed nations and their gimmicks, their gimmicks, what way it is affecting countries like India or
Yeah.
Korea. Korea
Yeah.
is, that I appreciate that without Western industrial, you didn't follow Western industrial policy. You follow your own policies.
Yeah.
South Korea followed its own policy. So you have not copied the Western industrial paths. Your originality is there. Originality is there. So it's really outstanding. And I think India, maybe I think last year Nobel laureate Darren Acemoglu also said that how colonial impact on our region, how it damaged our progress over the years. That he has mentioned. I think we have very good future. I think this region, particularly India, India is gaining momentum. The one of the big problem is not like, for example, see your BTS is very popular in India.
Oh,
BTS.
BTS.
Yeah, it's very popular in India. Very popular in India. You'll get more number of subscribers in India. So but that kind of innovative mindset is very much required. And another one more thing, unicorn. About unicorn he spoke. It's very less number, only 8. It's very sad part of it's a thing. But there are innovators. But now with this Make in India projects, Make in India is gaining. It's yielding good result. Even that there are some disturbing factors that recent tariff imposition by US government about Apple. They had 2 manufacturing unit in India. I think there again restriction on imposing more import duty. I don't know how long it will sustain. That's one. So thank you, Professor Lee, for this wonderful presentation. I personally benefited a lot. Please, I will invite you to one lecture to my Jawaharlal Nehru University. Please do come. And it's my pleasure to invite you. And I think my students, JNU students, must benefit from your presentation. And I will go through this because many aspects which you may be. I think 2 of your books. I'll go through that books. I think as it is free access, I download and I will recommend it to my students also. My JNU, I'll go for. I think because we can have one book review of this. Because
I will write book review of Professor Q.
Book review of this for the Indian students. Book review for the Indian students. We need that. Our students, particularly, we can have one that you can invite you can invite someone to review that. Okay. Thank you, Lee, and I also thank this Indian Researchers Association, particularly Vikas. It's Vikas Kumar. It's really beautiful. It is awesome. So I congratulate you for we got Lee for this Kyon Lee for this lecture. I really benefited from this and all the office barriers of this Indian Researchers Association. All these Manorama and Hemant Kumar, Shubhamani, and Arpana, all the executive and all the executive members. Thank you very much. A great day. Have a great day.
Okay. So I have a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Amber asking an important question. So what is the more important role among this institution, industrial policies or innovation capability? My answer is that it is industrial policy that targeted building innovation capabilities. Okay, so Korea was in middle income trap because we are also growing cheap wages. We realize that you cannot go on forever because your wages keep increasing. So we have to move to high-end segment, and that requires building innovation capability. And that's where we stepped up R&D effort expenditures. It's a very simple story. So thereby we generate world-class big business. That's the one. That's the most unique aspect of Korea's the upgrading into high-end economy. Okay, it's building innovation capability led by big businesses, and there was government support. Government picked them. All Samsung used to be a small company. Samsung used to have a original business was refined sugar, textile. They keep moving into new sectors, high-end sectors, and there was a public-private joint R&D effort to do that because the risk was too high. Okay.
Lily, out of curiosity, this one question: what is the secret behind the success of South Korea in automobile and IT industry, electronic industry?
It is also a difficult question, I think.
So as I mentioned, Samsung is now the lead of IT industry in Korea, but Samsung used to be making refined sugars and clothing. And government said that we have to move to high-end segment, high value added. So private company follow the signal, and Samsung move into IT manufacturing from 70s. So it was not done by purely market, but we discussion what's next emerging industry, where we should go in. We already had discussion like that between private sectors and government sectors. So government signaled now next target is IT. So I'll reserve amount of loan from bank and so on. So company, okay, let's move to that direction. Something like that. So there are the clear industry policies. Institution, as Mogulu, they talk about political institution, democracy.
Yeah.
But Korean cases, we have democracy after we are achieving economic progress. Democracy is something very expensive. You got to be rich first to buy democracy. That's our ideas.
That one more interesting observation.
There is a question from
DG,
there is a question.
Okay.
Yes,
TMD.
I think someone have raised their hand. So Ruby and Lokapal.
Ruby, okay.
Please unmute yourself and ask the question to Professor.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. I Lokpa Tamang from Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh. Sir, I have one question. Recently, the Rajiv Gandhi University Research Scholars Forum has organized one international seminar on Northeast India and beyond. And in that, we have received some papers on the rising consumerism of this Korean product in Arunachal Pradesh and Northeast India. So I wanted to ask, given the cultural and economic significance of BTS, Korean drama and Korean products in Northeast India, how do you think South Korea perceive the rising consumerism of this product, and what are the local implications of this on local industries?
Okay. Can I also hear from Ruby before I try to answer?
Yes, Professor Lee. Thank you for your presentation. I'm also a research scholar from Arunachal Pradesh, near East. So I have a question that in India and South Asian countries, innovation systems are highly uneven across states or regions. So do you think regional detours can still succeed?
You mean the uneven means that certain regions are more developed, others are less developed?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Maybe the situation in India is somewhat different because you are much bigger country than South Korea, and your region province is like the size of one country like South Korea. So this regional inequality might be very challenging issues. Right?
Yes.
So in the case, what do you mean by detours? Maybe in South Korea we had a kind of a imbalanced development. You know, we tried to make certain area or certain company grow first. Okay, and that's not easy politically, right? That's challengeable.
Yes.
So I don't know how much Indian people can accept such idea of imbalanced growth. Okay? So India's tradition of democracy and bigger country, I don't know whether that might not be that easy to sell this idea of imbalanced growth. And Korea also has, it was not easy. So we have kind of a hard dictatorship, hard authoritarianism, push these ideas. China too.
Okay.
So I don't know, these two alternative ideas of imbalanced growth is very hard choice to make depending upon context.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the first case about consumerism. So you are asking this origin of this rise of consumerism in Korea, or you are asking there was any role by government, or what is your aspect of inquiry? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Professor,
Yes,
he is asking, consumerism is increasing in northeastern part, even in India, for Korean products. Demand for
Yes.
Korean products are increasing. Even Korean
Okay.
food, Korean TV, Korean music.
Mm.
Likewise, this question is like
Yeah.
that. Even northeastern part, what we
Okay.
consider usually, they are less exposed to the entire nation, but consumerism is increasing in that region. They are
Okay.
surprising in that.
So what's the question?
No, he is asking reason for that.
Reason for that?
No, I mean, I want to know the impact of this rising consumerism on local industries in South Korea.
I don't know that those BTS, K-pop, that's the interesting area which was out of government hand.
No, consumer is entire India consumer is, consumer for Korean product is increasing in India, particularly Korean food. Korean food is very
Korean
famous
food,
nowadays.
beauty
Even
products.
in Delhi,
Yes.
all mall, people are crowded in Korean food mall, food, what we call food centers. Consumers are, it's very crowded.
Yeah. Maybe Korean food is very healthy. People not realize that. And I think it took, I don't know, Korean policy was mostly on manufacturing. And we didn't do much on this cultural good and so on. So maybe it's kind of final stage of development. Maybe if you get strong in manufacturing and income level and so on, you
Raj,